Hey, it's Katie Moran. Today I'm here with Parinaz, who is a fitness instructor and spiritual mentor who is empowering you to find wholeness within yourself through mind, body, and spiritual healing so you can live peaceful and free. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
So, getting into the depth of some of the topics you talk about, I really am so curious, how does one person who's experienced hardship make meaning of these most challenging moments?
It's a great question. And it's layered. The answer is layered for sure. Of course, everybody is in their unique point on their unique path. So the challenge that you're facing or the challenges you have faced in life, they are uniquely yours. And I think that's a powerful starting point to acknowledge them rather than trying to push them down or compare them to other people's. You are a human who has gone through some pretty real stuff. And so, by making meaning, in the process of making meaning of that, we have to start by first acknowledging it and then allowing ourselves the space, giving permission to ourselves to work through those with some conscious attention and compassion.
What does that look like, working through it?
Yeah. I think that it's a process of allowing yourself to see that your experiences are never just one thing. Hardly anything in life is all good or all bad. In fact, in even the most challenging moments of turmoil for you, there is wisdom, there is healing. You could even say there is positivity to be found. But working through it is going through that conscious journey of saying, what has happened? How did that affect me? How has that made me who I am today? And then, how do I want to hold this in my life as I move forward? That's a very conscientious process. It's not one where you just try to ignore the past or forget about the past or numb out the past. It's also not a process where you try to leap forward into saying, it's fine, it's all good, I'm better now, that was a long time ago. That level of trying to rush yourself or minimize it actually keeps you a lot more stuck in the pain than if you take the time to consciously move through these stages. And I talk about this a lot. You mentioned you heard one of my podcast episodes that's all about toxic positivity. And I told the story of my father and how he navigated some significant hardship in life, including losing a cultural identity, being forced to leave his home country, and then dealing with a lot of turmoil inside his home, you know, domestic abuse and violence, a lack of real nurturance inside the home, all happening at different stages of his life. And so you look at a person like this as an example, it would be so easy for him to suppress. And really, he did for a long time. You just suppress it, ignore it. You don't think about it, basically. And you just sort of bite your tongue and white knuckle your way through life. That is an example of someone who's just trying to not acknowledge, not work through the depths and the complexities and the layers of their life circumstances. And a lot of us do that because it's just a mechanism to move forward, to like keep waking up every day. However, it is not a process that facilitates real healing and true integration of your experiences so that you can evolve beyond them. So again, in that episode and in general, when I work with people, it's a lot of helping them see that while it might be scary or overwhelming, or like I don't even know where to start when looking at how to address some of these things that have happened in life, it ultimately comes down to asking yourself the question, do I want to evolve? Do I want to evolve beyond what has happened to me? Do I want to know and trust and feel and believe that I am more than my past? And if the answer is yes, then the invitation is to slow down and to not hurry yourself through the process of healing and to not get so consumed with needing to put a positive spin on it.
Can you define, and you touch on this a lot in what you just said, but can you define what toxic positivity is for people who haven't heard of it before?
Yeah, the way I see it is you're trying to just act like everything's fine, or you're doing that constant comparison of, oh, somebody else always has it worse than me. I think that we've been conditioned to say those things because we think it makes us like a good person who's not whiny or entitled or something. But it's a fine line. I think it is true, it's good to be aware of the fact that suffering is universal, and to not allow yourself to fall into a victim mentality. At
Mhm.
the same time, we are all products of our environment and life circumstances, which means you very well may be the victim of some pretty unfortunate situations, circumstances, and people. That doesn't mean you have to remain a victim. So, toxic positivity, in my mind, is not allowing yourself to really see the depths and feel the depths of your experiences and your traumas, if you want to call them that, and instead saying, no, I'm fine. It was a long time ago. I'm over it. Or somebody always has it worse, as a way of minimizing it.
Yeah, and I think when you touch upon this idea that it's good or it's seen as good to not whine, and even I think there's a lot to say about this idea of spiritual bypassing, and that
Mhm.
people can feel like it's below their higher self to even experience things when it's like really a form of bypassing what they need to heal, and it's
Yes,
neglecting that healing.
absolutely. You bypass it in the name of being more enlightened. But the truth is, as my father has always told me, there's no free lunch in life. You got to stop and look at it if you want to evolve, truly evolve, um, and grow as a person. And I will say, to your point, I think a lot of us can get swept up in the image of a spiritually enlightened person who
Hmm.
just isn't bothered or rattled by anything, and they just start in this glowing aura of positivity. Well, that's a nice idea, but you actually become a person who is less rattled and less triggered and less stagnant in life when you look at the things that have caused those reactions to your body and mind and spirit in the first place. It's not just trying to conjure the image of an enlightened person that gets you there. It's through the real work. So to that end, I think it's valuable for everybody, for all of us, to remember that life is a dualistic experience. Duality is an essential aspect of existence. We see it all across our world. And again, I talk about this a lot in my podcast, and it's actually a Persian concept that's written into some of the most ancient texts, where it is known that if you just look out into nature with the moon and the sun, the seasons of life, there is constant change and there is duality. You cannot have the light without the dark. You can't have the warmth without the cold, right? We we wouldn't know, we would not understand what healing and positivity and peace and ease feels like without knowing pain
Hmm.
and disruption. So when trying to evolve, it's not ignore the dark and cling to the light. It's navigate, learn how to navigate your way through the dark. And in that process, you will arrive at your version of light.
Yeah, I think about that and I think about how sometimes the inner work can seem like an abstract concept, and people can hear that and they can conceptualize that the importance of doing the inner work, but they might not have tangible steps of what that entails. So what would you tell someone who is looking for guidance on how to do the inner work and doesn't really have a clear definition of what that looks like in terms of actions?
Yeah, I would say I totally agree. There's not a lot of clarity on the how to, right? Actually, one of the most common things I hear people say when they find me is, I've been going to therapy to try to figure out the what. And I've read self-help books or I listen to podcasts and I kind of get it. Like I had these things happen or, I have this pattern in my life, but what do I do about it?
Mhm.
And that is exactly why I try to bring to the communities of the world this space. That is, I guess, as you would call it, like the gap in the market that I try to fill. I totally agree with you. There is not clarity on what to do. So basically, I've aimed to create a reasonable pathway for people to follow to begin that journey. And I've really tried to make it one that's accessible regardless of where you come from, or how old you are, or how long ago this stuff happened, or regardless of how clear you are on what the exact issue is. This pathway is meant to invite you into a space of figuring that out. And it is one that integrates healing for your body because a lot of our pain, our trauma, our stress lives in the body, in the nervous system. It's a pathway that also addresses your mind because the mind has been conditioned to believe certain things, to doubt certain things. That's where our trust issues come from. The mind's memory of what's happened and seen. And then this pathway also aims to really uplift you through a conscious community. And I hear a lot of people say, I try to find solace in community. I've tried to go back to my church, because I kind of grew up with a religious upbringing, but those people don't feel authentic. They don't feel real. Or I've tried to go to a therapist, but it feels like I'm talking to a wall.
Mhm.
And so I think finding a community that's conscientious, that is not there to put you in a box or to fix you or to figure it out for you, but to hold you and witness you and in their journey help you feel less alone. That's what this pathway that I aim to create every day through my programs and my content and my programs. It's like those are, I think, the three essential components: mind, body, spirit, that can help people heal.
So this is more of a personal question, but I'm sure someone else is probably curious who's in the audience. Um, Have you ever thought about creating like a guidebook, kind of like Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way? It just seems like it seems like this is like stuff that like you could do in community, but also you can kind of like I know there's a lot of people who are into self-development in a book so that people don't know they are. I know
Yeah.
someone specifically, she saw me reading it was like a self-help book and she was like, I love books like that, but I would never read it in public.
Oh, wow. That's cool. It's so funny. Your question actually is tapping my nervous system right now. I have this long-standing, battle. I use that term lightly, but kind of this battle with my inner writer, my inner artist,
Hmm.
who I
Hmm.
think for a long time has wanted to write a book. And
Mm-hmm.
my own conditioning and my own past pains have for a long time kept me from feeling, I believe, safe enough to really do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's funny you ask that question.
Yeah,
The
well,
answer.
I think the people who are speakers could probably learn a lot from you sharing that and the idea that they have so much comfort in getting on stage, they have so much comfort on leading a workshop, they have so much comfort on really doing it with the people. And
Mm-hmm,
I do understand that when you're with people, like it's like you get that instant like feeling of
mm-hmm,
connection. And I actually have a coach, Eric Mazel, who talks about this, and the idea that sometimes people think writing a book is like this task that really has to be this like big thing. But I mean, specifically for like speakers, coaches, like you can actually like use your program. And like if you ever see The Artist Way,
mm-hmm,
you can go through your program and have it like each one be like a chapter, and like look at like what they're actually like going through, like your clients, and like incorporate that. And that for anyone who is looking to expand how they reach people, I think it's so powerful. This idea that you can create something like as you're doing it, and that you can like focus on like writing one chapter like after a session, and just like
mm-hmm.
as you would like debrief through journaling or something. And yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, you have so many thoughts in me churning. I don't even know if I could come up with a cohesive thought right now. So I'm sort of like, wow, this is a big thing that you're opening a can of worms on me right here. But so I might answer you with a response that's kind of an indirect response. But I will just
Mm-hmm.
say this. Is something that came up as I was just listening to you. I've had some people who have walked this journey with me. They've done, you know, what you could call private mentorship with me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's that really in-depth mentorship and guidance that's personal to them.
Mm-hmm.
By the end of that journey, they have said, I'm thinking of two individuals specifically. These are people who started out, in the corporate life, seeming like they have it all together. They've got these really good careers. They make a lot of money. They're very successful. They're in the gym. They're fit. Da da da. It seems like they've got it made, but on the inside, they are like, I am lost. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
who I am. I am burnt out. I don't want this, but I do not understand why. And what they're really saying without saying it is, I have pushed myself so far into the box of performing, of achieving, of
Wow.
accomplishing that I don't know now how to live. And again, they're not
Mm-hmm.
saying those words, but that is the experience they're having when they come into this container with me. And in the process, the pathway that we walk, as I've just described to you, they start to realize, oh my God, there are these major things that have been influencing me in life to be this person, to try to become the person I think I should be. And
Mm-hmm.
that maybe has worked. Like maybe I've gotten to the success. So as you were saying, there might be listeners here who are like, I'm on the stages speaking. I'm actually
Mm-hmm.
a coach for other people. But on the inside, something is missing. Something is
Mm-hmm.
not right here. What is
Mm-hmm.
it? And what I always say to them is like, that missing piece, quote unquote, it's your essence. You're
Ooh.
missing your essence, a clear, conscious connection to your essence. And that doesn't mean that when you find your essence, when you go on this pathway, you have to give up your success. You can still be that successful person if you want it, but you cannot feel whole. You cannot feel fulfilled in that journey towards success and achievement if you are
Mm-hmm.
disconnected from your essence. And so, in restoring the relationship with your essence, you will find not only success monetarily or status wise, but also success in the form of wholeness and fulfillment. And what a lot of times they find, and that these two individuals I'm thinking about who have worked with me in depth, they've now come out the other side saying, I'm now inspired to change my work, evolve my work in this way. I now want to help people in this way that I never
Mm-hmm.
thought I would before. And they feel empowered to do it. They feel
Mm-hmm.
clear on how to do it. So it's a way to evolve the person that you are trying so hard to become by actually connecting into who you've always been.
Yeah, you know, I think when you talked about that, and I don't know, this could be a tangent, but I see it so frequently, and it's something that really breaks my heart is not just like people achieving in areas that they lose sight of their essence, but people who are so afraid to step into their essence and to show up as who they really are that they hide behind like so scrolling on social media and like going out with their friends and like they might like go out every night and not really anyone in their inner circle knows what's going through their mind and what they're dealing with. And when I was in college, that's something that I experienced. And you know, I think I can talk to it in the way that I had dreams that I wasn't pursuing that made me unhappy, and the way people treated me, I felt defined by it.
Mm,
But I think now it's it's common. It's like it's culturally accepted, and that like you'll see people just scroll on their phone and be unhappy, and they don't think to themselves that there's a solution and that there could be action they take. And I think
mm,
when you talk about evolution, what do you think is the difference between people, like you say, who are seekers and people who don't seek
mm.
and who don't define themselves as someone who is committed to evolving?
Yeah, good question. I think it's a function of their awareness. What I mean is, every human being on earth is just existing in their plane of awareness. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean anybody is better or worse than anybody else. It doesn't mean that if you choose to seek your healing and growth, you're somehow an elevated person. It means that we're all on our own individual plane of awareness. And so some people might say, my solution is to scroll.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, for some people, it might just be their thing where it's like, yeah, I'm going to try the same five things over and over again for the rest of my life, hoping I get a different result.
Mm-hmm.
And that ultimately is a function of what we perceive to be true and what we perceive to be worthy of, you know? I remember being in a phase of like, I'm trying, I'm doing the best I can, and I feel like crap. My relationship is falling apart. My job is burning me out. I'm not happy. I don't feel healthy. I don't like who I am. I'm not the person I want to be, but what am I supposed to do? It's almost like your awareness doesn't allow you to see other possibilities. I stayed stuck there for a long time. And then I shifted, very minorly into a place of saying, okay, maybe I could get help through therapy, kind of the
Mm-hmm.
conventional methods, if you'll call it that. And it was not until life cracked me open. Life burned everything around me down to the point where I
Mm-hmm.
truly, to this day, I describe it as a time where my life was in ashes and I was just standing watching it. It wasn't until that point that my awareness shifted enough. I had an internal pivot to say, there's got to be more. I have got to figure something else out. I don't know what it is. I don't know where to look. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I need it. I think just by creating that pivot inside yourself, you've now opened the doors of your consciousness. You've opened the doors of your awareness to start receiving in new forms of guidance. And that is truly how it happened for me. And it's how a lot of people find me. I have a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
say, I don't know how I found you. I just heard your voice.
Mm-hmm.
And here I am now, working with you. That's how it happened for me too. I was in the search for guidance, not even knowing where to begin, but I had a friend say to me something about trying to heal sexual trauma, which is something
Mm-hmm.
that I went through in college using Tantra. I didn't know what the hell Tantra was, But it was just that comment from that one friend in that one random moment that that propelled me to do something, because I had already made the internal shift, as I mentioned a moment ago, like I've got to figure this out. There
Mm-hmm.
has to be more for me. And
Mm-hmm.
then I found a podcast about, not tantra, but like this whole spiritual world. It opened my eyes. And actually, that led me to find my first teacher and mentor,
Mm-hmm.
which has completely changed my life. So, this is all to say, I think some people will, as you said, like stay stuck, quote unquote. They are functioning in their plane of awareness, and they might just need more things or different things to unfold in their life for them to reach a point where they say, I want something different.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not for any of us to judge, because the only thing you really have control over and are responsible for is your personal healing and evolution. And so allow yourself to focus there is what I would say. And I guess I'll just make this one other point, because we talked about spiritual bypassing, et cetera,
Mm-hmm.
earlier. The story I just told about, kind of finding a mentor through a podcast, I think for some people that might feel a bit fanciful, or like, well, how do you know the quacks from the real deals? Because
Mm-hmm.
there's so much noise out there, and that's totally
Mm-hmm.
true. That 100% is. And you can get, kind of duped by the charlatans of the spiritual world. But I would say, like, when you have made that choice for yourself of like, I am looking for more out of life, it is a very real raw feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you open yourself on that level of authentic vulnerability, authentic guidance comes to you. And so you don't need to be fearful of like, is this person, a phony or whatever. Obviously, do your due diligence. Don't
Mm-hmm.
blindly trust people when they're like, oh, I can help you. But
Mm-hmm.
but I think like also trust that you trust yourself.
Yeah, so I actually do a lot of suicide prevention work, and when I was suicidal, I felt like my dreams really kept me alive, like writing and specifically like my stories, because I had ideas for stories um since like childhood and adolescence. But what I'm getting at is this idea that I felt like those dreams brought to life my inner child. And I want to know what exactly is the relationship between the inner child and your essence.
I feel your inner child is a manifestation of your essence. Your
Mm,
essence is this formless, potent power in you, if we can think of it that way. Think of it as just a force that lives in
mm,
you. And that essence, you were born into this world with it. It is not, when I say formless, I mean, it's not your age, it's not your gender, it's not your name. It's this indescribable, multi-layered, multi-dimensional aspect to you. And I
mm-hmm,
believe that your essence is that connection point to the universe around us. The
mm-hmm,
essence of you is not different than the essence of that natural beauty, the wonders of our universe. We all have that inside of us in our essence. And
mm-hmm,
it's just this, maybe it feels like this tiny little light, this whisper inside of you, but it is there. And when we're children, before the world has gotten to us,
mm-hmm,
we are an expression of that force. And your inner child, if maybe you can recall a time before the world got to you, before the pain, the fear crept in
mm-hmm,
and caused you to doubt yourself and your purpose and your place in the
mm-hmm,
world. If you can recall that time, that child just lived unbridled, unapologetically, with abandon. They just were. And they were creative. They were expressive. And it's this small window of time before, you know, before we have to start locking that stuff up, to survive in our household or to be acceptable in society. But when you remember and when you reclaim the wisdom of your inner child, which is actually a huge part, by the way, of this pathway of healing the body, of
Mm-hmm.
healing the mind. You can't do it without looking at the inner child. That's inevitable. When you do that, you start to remember your peace and your purpose. As you said, it's like these stories, these
Mm-hmm.
ideas. How is it that an idea could could help you stay alive? Well, it's because that's your life force.
Mm-hmm.
I know it might feel a bit esoteric what we're talking about, but these are very real moments of conversation, very real moments that we come to on this path together. Who is your inner child? How do we find them? How can we really talk to them through body-based sensation so that you remember? You remember your light. You remember your reason for being.
Mm-hmm.
And you do feel like this is me. This is why I'm here. And I'm going to follow that thread to my next step.
How does self-censorship impact your inner child?
Self-censorship. Can you give a description of what you mean?
Yeah, like say you feel like you would get judged to say
Yeah.
something, so
Yeah.
you don't say it.
Yeah. Okay. Totally. I ask this question on my social media all the time, actually. I'll put like a poll on my stories. I'll be like, how often do you start typing out a text to somebody and then erase it all and type something different? Because you're like, oh, I
Mm-hmm.
can't say that. That is your conditioned voice overriding your inner voice, the voice of your essence, the voice of the inner child. Again, think about a
Mm-hmm.
child. They are going to express what they want to express,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they are just so innocent and so loving. And there's something that you really respect in a child because they just don't hold back.
Mm-hmm.
The conditioning is what causes you to censor. So, your question, how does that censorship impact the inner child? Well, it works in complete contradiction to the inner child,
Mm-hmm.
which has then the consequence of you feeling less alive
Mm-hmm.
because your inner child, your essence, never gets the chance to just be. And I know it's scary as shit to say what you really want to say. I know it freaks us all the fuck out when we're like, oh my God, did I really just say that? Did I really just tell that person that I have feelings for them? Or did I really say I love you? I know it's scary, but it's only scary because you have been conditioned to believe that you should be somebody else. For example, you might struggle with that vulnerability because you've been conditioned to believe that strength is in stoicism. You
Mm-hmm.
might struggle to tell somebody how you really feel because you were conditioned in your childhood to know that that's weak, wimpy, or you're complaining, or that mental health isn't a real thing. Whatever, it could be
Mm-hmm.
anything. But the conditioned voice, every time it overrides the inner child, the essence, the inner knowing, you are going to feel less alive. You're not going to feel whole. And this is really important to see because if you don't feel whole, you cannot attract experiences in your life that feel whole. A person feeling half cannot attract a person feeling whole. So if you're in relationship struggles, you have this never-ending cycle of toxicity in your life or career, it's worth examining how much am I holding my true self back? And one last thing I'll say to that end is when you walk this pathway of healing, kind of allowing your essence to shine again, you will be more open, you will be more expressive in ways that might surprise you, but the people that come into your life will respect that. They will honor that. I know for me, for so long, my creativity, my playfulness, my femininity was shut down. And I
Mm-hmm.
have spent so many years on this path of of spiritual healing, reclaiming that. And through fitness, trying to reclaim that too. And that, trust in my body. And today, just as an example, like the partner that I'm with today, one of the things he most consistently reflects back to me is, you're so feminine, you're so open, and you help me be open. And your artistic side gets me curious about my artistic side.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the things that I felt like I had to shut down and hide away and erase the most because of my conditioning are the things that actually create a lot of healing and joy, not just for me, but the people around me today.
Mm-hmm.
I think that brings us to another point, which is that we rarely see and can grasp the intrinsic value of doing our own healing. We rarely realize that by healing, we open the doors for other people to feel whole and to
Mm-hmm.
feel safe too.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, I'm not suggesting this from a place of moral high ground or whatever. I'm just saying it happens. When you embrace your essence, you will be putting that out to the world and people will know. Maybe they don't consciously know what's happening, but they will feel safe enough
Mm-hmm.
around you to be their authentic self, to embrace their essence. And all of a sudden you're like, holy shit, I feel good. And the people around me feel good. And that makes me happy. And
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, that's what we want. We want happiness. We've
Mm-hmm.
just been confused about what happiness means and what it looks like and how to get there.
What's an immediate action someone could take to nurture their inner child?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think an immediate action is to actually ask yourself, who was I before the world got to me? Like,
Mm.
make it a journal prompt, and don't rush yourself. Like you could write that on your journal page, a blank page, and then just kind of walk away for a little bit, but just chew on it in your awareness. Who was I before the world got to me? Another entry point to that question, if it feels too big or too daunting, be like, what are some things I've always loved? Always, like since the time I was a little baby. What are some things I've always been drawn to or gravitated towards or been good at? And just try to create a list of like 3 to 5 things. So, for example, when I do this exercise, the first thing that comes up, what is something that I've just always loved and been connected to? Moving my body.
Mm-hmm.
I think back to my inner child, and I was like always on the go, sprinting around, never walking. So, for me, allowing myself to be kind of that free form, free moving adult who takes up space in the form of movement that's not just planned, like point A to point B, is very healing to me. Um, for the next person over, it could be like, I've always been artistic. I draw, or I sing, or I
Mm-hmm.
love playing an instrument. Okay, well, allow yourself to go back there.
Mm.
And I know that sometimes it's like, I can't. I don't even know how. It's like it's so triggering to like pick up that guitar or to try. And that's where I say to people, maybe then it's really right for you to have some of that guidance.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't have to do this alone. I didn't do it alone. I don't do it alone. And when I work with people, it's because this is some real deep stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to do it alone. I think it's actually unreasonable to assume that we can or should do it alone, even if we can. So, first action step is explore, just get curious. Who was that younger me? And if there's somebody in your life that you really trust, you could call them. Maybe they've known you for a long time. And again, you trust them. It's like, what's something I've just always been good at or always loved? See what they say. And it might be similar to what you say. So I would say that, but then also like allow yourself, give yourself permission to get the guidance, to get the support,
Mm-hmm.
to remember. Because there are so many ways we can do this. Like for some
Mm-hmm.
people, the exercise I just outlined might really work. For other people, it might be like, what? I'm drawing blanks. In which case,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a more somatic approach I've
Mm-hmm.
had people where in the second time ever meeting with them, we do a somatic inner child visualization, and that creates so many ahas for them. So I think it's really individualistic, and that's why I'm here to support you in finding your unique starting point.
Mm-hmm. I love that so much, and it brings up so many topics of like self-nurturing and the idea of self-neglect. And I'm just curious, do you feel like connecting with your essence is what makes you happy? And do you feel like there would be any reason for someone, any like healing reason to not be connected to your essence?
Mhm. To your first question, I do believe it's what makes us happy.
Mm-hmm.
Would there be any reason to not connect with your essence? I don't feel like it's gonna do you harm. I think
Mm-hmm.
we're afraid to do it because I think some people are afraid of what they're gonna find when they look at themselves. Like maybe there's a subconscious fear of like, maybe there's nothing that great about me. Maybe I don't have anything special to offer. Maybe I actually don't bring anything to the table. And by embracing my essence, I'm just gonna remember that or realize that further. That fear is gonna be confirmed. But the truth is, that's not what happens because your
Mm-hmm.
essence is this fundamental force of energy. It is not good or bad. It is not about going from imperfection to perfection. It's just
Mm-hmm.
about realizing who you are and finding some real peace in that. So I think it doesn't do harm. I think it restores you. It restores your perception of who you are. It helps you realize you're so much more
Mm-hmm.
than what you've been afraid of.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the idea that some people might be afraid to evolve because they
Mhm.
don't know what will come up and they don't know like what they have to face to do that. And
Yeah.
in that, I just want to ask the question, how does someone come back stronger after they've been through something? And specifically after it's felt like the truth, honesty, facing their fears is something that would provoke so much in them that would feel like they're almost harming themselves to do it or their perception of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I do think a lot of people feel that way. It's like, oh my gosh, this is
Hmm.
overwhelming to even think about the stuff I would have to look at. And again, that's why I really feel like we need sacred spaces to do this.
Mm,
Because as much as it is a process of opening yourself to yourself, you don't have to do it in a way that feels like you're cutting yourself open and
mhm,
bleeding out. Like I actually feel like that's very dangerous. We need to
mhm,
protect ourselves, our integrity. We need to respect ourselves in this process. And I feel like that's missing out there. I feel like people will say, well, you just have to do this or you just have to do that. And it's like, well, that's not very sensitive. That's not
mhm,
very informed, in my opinion. So I think, again, I mentioned earlier, like it's like that term, like there's a gap in the market, and frankly, spirituality and healing has become an industry, and
mhm,
and people are selling healing to you, and so it's like I think there's a gap of real safe, trauma informed, sensitive approaches to this work where you can say, this is where I'm ready to begin. And I'll give an example to try to drive this point home on a tangible level. I had a client where, in our first initial conversation, she outlined some pieces of her upbringing that were kind of separate things to explore. So she mentioned that she had this upbringing where she was always kind of ignored and pushed aside by her caregivers. Then she described sexual assault she went through as a teenager from a family member. And then she described the situation of what it was like for her connecting with romantic partners. And so these all feel like distinct areas, distinct places where we could go. So my first question after she's finished describing these things is, of what you've just laid out, is there any that you feel safe enough to start talking about and exploring together today? And then I just give her space to feel that, to think about it. And then she said, I think I'm ready to start over here. I'm definitely not ready to talk about that. Okay, that sounds good. And then my next statement is, as we explore together, at any point, if it feels too much, if it's bringing up sensations of overwhelm or anxiety, just let me know and we'll pause, we'll reset together. And so I think a lot of it is that trauma-informed approach of like giving agency back to the person who is seeking guidance because they feel lost or out of control. And I think when you remember your agency, which sometimes just that sacred space can help give you back, you're like, okay, I can do this. I can look at this. It's not so bad.
Mm-hmm. How do you know the difference between something you're not ready to look at and something that is unsafe to look at?
I think that you'll get a pretty strong sensation through the body. A lot of us
Mm-hmm.
are disconnected from our body because we're in chronic flight or fight,
Mm-hmm.
or we are we are in trauma still. And so we
Mm-hmm.
cannot always delineate for ourselves where to start or what's right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's again why I take that integrated approach of, we're not just going to talk about stuff. We need to tap into the body somatically to see what signals is it giving you. But this is
Mm-hmm.
the cool thing, because right now, like at your starting point, you might be like, I have no idea what is safe. I don't know if this is going to harm me. Well, once you get into a space where you are working alongside somebody to explore your sensations and what comes up for you, you're going to know because they're your sensations. You just might not have up to that point been given kind of the space and the language and the tools to think about how you feel, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you all of a sudden you're like, okay, we start talking about this and I feel this. And then you're able to say, okay, well, that sensation might be signaling to us this. And you're like, okay, yeah, that feels right. And now we can proceed this way, right? It's a process that you walk through that you get to know and you get to build back agency through. It's not like, okay, here we are today, we're talking about this, let's crack you open and hope you're fine. It's a lot more of a co-creation, co-exploration. And you are you, like you're here, you are gonna know, but you just might not realize how much of that knowledge you have yet because you haven't been given the spaces and the tools to describe it.
Mm-hmm. How can people have the courage, and maybe it's not courage, but how can people have the courage to say no to things that they know are not right for them?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And honestly, I think it's everything we've just talked about. We
Mm-hmm.
say we say yes to things that are not right for us, or we say no to things that are right for us because of conditioning, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
You just have in your mind this like lens. It's like a veil that covers your consciousness. That's like, do this, don't do this. And it becomes quite nuanced to the individual, the ways they say no and the ways they say yes. But we can boil it down to say that is that baseline your conditioning. And to start reversing that process, and
Mm-hmm.
saying yes to the things that are right for you and no to the things that are not right for you. We have to decondition the mind, clear it out of all of that built up junk, and come back to your clear mind, which you do have. Again, at baseline, your essence is clear.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that you've lived this long life where a bunch of stuff has happened and clouded that essence, covered it. So to answer your question, we have to start by coming back to ourselves and navigating through some of that darkness, as we
Mm-hmm.
said, to really make meaning of what has happened so that we see it clearly and it no longer influences us, but it just becomes a piece of knowledge we have that we can make conscious decisions from.
That's so interesting. And I think it really kind of like describes what you kind of like the word you used earlier, a path, and that it's not like necessarily one thing, and it's not like one exercise, and it's not like one characteristic to develop. It's this idea of like a path. And I wonder, on that path, is there anything that you would consider necessary for people to take with them?
Yes, more than one thing, but the first thing that jumps out as me is you need to reclaim the connection to yourself, your inner self.
Hmm.
And that starts, I believe, with the body.
Hmm.
Your body is your home. Your body is the home of your essence, your personality, your you. And so, if we can start by connecting into that sacred home of yours,
Hmm.
then we can feel safe enough to look at some of that stuff. And and again, that's why an integrated approach, the body-based, the somatic healing is so key and has to be part, in my opinion, has to be part of that pathway to healing.
I love that. Where can people find you?
Yeah. So social media, we've got an Instagram, we've got a podcast, we've got a website. It's all Parinaz Shams. So if you search that, you'll probably find one of those things. But I always respond to DMs. If you send me a message on Instagram, I'll always respond. If you head to my website, there's a text feature there. You can text us and ask questions, or you can subscribe to the newsletter. And of course, on my podcast, I'm always um, basically in conversation with you there, even if we've never met. So all three of those places are great.
Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.